It's funny, Charles, for the longest time, I thought you had to be smart to become a billionaire, but we're learning today that's not always the case. How are you, Charles?
Doing well, Jason. Thanks for asking. Hope you're well too. Hope you're safe. I'm seeing a lot of reports. Uh, I watch principally over the internet of amazing crime scenes in and around New York City. I mean, what the hell is going on in that place?
Did you see that the interim commissioner, Donlin, has also now been raided by some unnamed federal agency? It's crazy. It's worse than a Batman episode.
Well, you see, I think what's happened is right after 9/11 in particular, there were security services that made money, but it didn't really escalate until after September 11, 2001, when the multinational institutions all figured out that they better have security on top of the normal police. And so when that happened and the market for providing private security services exploded, then all these crooked assholes in the various large police forces and in the federal agencies, they realized that not only could they basically do very little over whatever the period is to collect the pension, but that after they got their pension, they left the whatever their public service role was. They could then band together and form these private companies that would get venture and private equity backing, and they could get very, very rich off contracts, basically. And that's what's going on now. It's tough to make money, as you know well, and as I know well, in the private sector. Competition is cutthroat. But in this new game that we actually lucked into, I would say, luckily, not unluckily, not commonly, and we when we the first serious or deep dive that you and I did was the business model for charity fraud.
Right.
And
Years ago.
now, in 2017, and now Elon Musk and Mark Andreessen and others, judging by Twitter, are figuring out that the grift game is very simple if you're prepared to be crooked and a quote public servant. What you do is you sit atop like John Podesta is with the Green New Deal, like Pete Buttigieg is with the Inflation Reduction Act. You sit atop an allocation that is made by Congress for hundreds of billions or even trillions of dollars, and then you have the discretion to funnel those flows to nonprofits or NGOs, and nobody really checks because that's the way the system is operating. Nobody checks to see where that money actually goes. You send it towards a leaky nonprofit run by, say, Andrew Cuomo's sister or the Clintons, who are going to spend a lot of time in the coming days bragging about how virtuous their Clinton Global Initiative is, which doesn't exist and isn't a charity and is a grift fest. When you have all these things running around and you have an IRS with a political appointee at the top of it and all these bandits inside of it who are determined to protect their allies from exposure and to only throw us crumbs in Corinne Brown and that kind of stuff instead of going after hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars of charity fraud, you end up in this situation we have. And New York City is the epicenter for it because you have people like Bill Gates, as an example, can find a way to donate appreciated stock in the old days to a not-for-profit. If he has any nexus in New York City, where I think he does because he owns an apartment there, he did at one point, you can donate appreciated stock in the old days to one of these nonprofits, and you can get a gigantic tax deduction, which you can use against your earned income. And that's a game that a lot of these people have been playing for a long time. And very easily, when people talk about how we need a 35-point plan or a 5-point plan to sort things out, you don't need a 5-point plan. You have existing laws and regulations on the books that could be used to take, for starters, the top 100 public charities in this country. Every single one of those charities needs to be audited, and not by some schlock outfit that used to be based in Little Rock, or even by Price Waterhouse, which has conflicts of interest in this case. You take one of these, you take somebody like a Bob Bishop or a team of Bob Bishops to go in and tick off these top 100 especially including the Harvards, the Yales, the Columbias, etc. And when you discover that a public charity is in fact a propaganda mill and a corruption mill, you cancel its tax-exempt status and you send it a gigantic bill, which it can pay out of its endowment, and you shut the motherfucker down. That's what you need to do. And all you need to do is one, maybe three, and the rest of them will get serious about discharging their fiduciary duties. But to date, none of them do that. And people see it. So here's B-Rock, going around with his Easter Island head ridiculous monstrosity in Chicago, pretending that's a public charity when it's nothing more than a self-enrichment mill. He's got his wife is out at Costco hawking soda, which is a ridiculous. I mean, anybody who's invested in that venture is a stone cold fool. Trying to take on Pepsi and Coca-Cola with a new soft drink is a fool's errand. It will never work. And I'm very sure of that. So here's Michelle, nothing better to do. I suppose it's too boring to hang around one of her 4 mansions. So she's out there at Costco trying to pretend that her soda business is actually going to make money for investors, which it never will. So that's soda, what we need to do.
But Charles, isn't she supposed to be into healthy stuff? Why is she selling soda? Wasn't she trying to get people to not eat? It's less sugar. That's going to fail.
She's a member of the idiots or smarter wing of the Democratic Party, which is basically most of it.
I've seen a lot of people posting on X that there's some explosive something with Michelle Obama going to a Diddy party, but I haven't seen what it is that they're saying. And they just say that. They haven't shown anything. I hate it when people do that. Again,
this whole celebrity crowd. And frankly, I was thinking about it as I was getting ready for this broadcast. People talk about rap music. They're using the silent C. It's crap music. It's horrible. I mean, it's not music. It's noise. And getting around what was really going down with the crap music revolution, it's just money laundering. That's all it is.
Well, some people would say it's more sinister than that. I'll slightly disagree with you. I think there are some hip hop artists and elements that are interesting and good, but it's kind of been admitted, I think, that the CIA created gangster rap and influenced this hip hop lifestyle to sort of in the same way that they infiltrated the anti-war movement in the 60s to, test out LSD on hippies. And if people get into looking into what was going on with Charles Manson and Haight-Ashbury, there's a lot of stuff going on there.
Again, this is not, it'd be one thing if we're Saudi Arabia and we've got a sovereign wealth fund and a small population and a balance sheet that's rock solid, is platinum solid, right? We don't have that. We have a government that's hemorrhaging trillion-dollar deficits run by a collection of idiots. Think about what we saw in the last several days. The first cabinet meeting in 11 months. Stop there. Hold the phone, as my basketball coach used to say in high school. Hold the freaking phone. First cabinet meeting in 11 months? What the fuck are you people doing in Washington, D.C.? You can't have a cabinet meeting every 11 months. And then Biden kind of rolls in, either drunk or on meds or, with a dirty diaper, and turns to his wife and says, "Yo, go get him, kid." And his wife conducts the cabinet meeting. If I were a lowly cabinet secretary, the lowest of the low, I don't know who that is, somebody who has less status than Pete Buttigieg, I would stand up in the cabinet meeting and say, either Jill Biden leaves the room or we're all leaving. It's ridiculous. Nobody elected Jill Biden to be president of the United States and conduct cabinet meetings. Nobody did that, which then gets to the point of, under the 25th Amendment, when you have questions, and certainly there are and there were legitimate questions about the mental health of Joe Biden years ago, okay? The responsibility falls to the vice president to poll the cabinet and then decide whether or not they're going to have a vote to remove the president, either temporarily or permanently. That vote should have happened years ago. And Kamala Harris, yet another responsibility she failed to discharge that responsibility. And she can't say it was because she was busy inspecting the border. She's never done that. You know, this is worse than a Jerry Lewis slapstick comedy.
Yeah.
Pretending that the Biden administration is an actual administration. Of course it isn't.
What about skipping this dinner, this historic Al Smith dinner? She's skipping everything, Charles. She's too busy not being interviewed to go to that cabinet meeting.
Yeah, again, to sit here, I just tweeted out before, on my big Twitter account before going on air here, that Hillary Clinton, it is uncontested. Hillary Clinton and Mark Elias and others did rig the Democratic primary of 2015-16 to install Hillary Clinton. They did do that. They tried to rig the general election, and that didn't work. Thank God. In 2020, there was a semblance of a Democratic primary. Kamala Harris kicked Joe Biden's ass hard. There was talk after the debates in 19 that Biden would drop out. Okay, but then James Fishfly Clyburn, a crooked guy from South Carolina who's some kind of congressman down there, has an annual fish fry everyone has to go to and contribute to so he can fatten his nest for retirement, which can't come soon enough. He just rigs the Democratic Party and they install Puddinghead, Joe Biden, Dirty Diaper Man, in as the nominee. And only now, 4 years later, only now are we getting to the bottom of what truly may have happened in terms of ballots that shouldn't have been counted, people that shouldn't have voted, people who voted multiple times, dead people who voted. Only now are we getting to the bottom, maybe, of what really happened in 2020. And here we are in 2024, and crap weasel Pelosi is up there saying, oh, yeah, Kamala Harris, we had an open primary and she won.
Wasn't that
crazy?
What the
fuck are you talking about?
Exactly.
What the fuck are you talking about? You guys, the Democrats, decided not to hold primaries. You had a legitimate candidate, Bobby Kennedy Jr. Now, I don't happen to like his politics, but I admire what he's doing now. He's a patriot. He's a statesman. He tried to get to be a candidate in the primaries, and the Democrats said, you know what? The party of John F. Kennedy is going to say, fuck you to Robert Kennedy Jr. I mean, what has your family done to the Democratic Party? I mean, you had one guy was assassinated that was like, oh, no, there are two of your family members who were assassinated. I mean, come on. This is the party that pretends it's inclusive and denies Robert Kennedy the chance to be on the 2024 ballot and then finds itself in a position where Puddinghead just, slobbers his way, gums his way through the only debate that he had. And ever since then, after he failed as a nominee in that debate, at the Democratic National Convention, he gets up and he says, I'm not done. I've got 6 months left. And he goes on vacation. This is the party trying to pretend that it's inclusive and representative of the American population. And 4 months ago or thereabouts, insiders in the Democratic Party were saying Kamala Harris has to go. She has to go. She's incompetent. Staff turnover is too high. She hasn't accomplished anything. Now she's a combination of Mahatma Gandhi and Mother Teresa, except she's drunk at the events where she shows up, and she likes her Willie's Brown. I mean, this is somebody who should not be put forward. It's a disgrace, an affront to accomplished women that this idiot is out there pretending to be the legitimate nominee, facing off against, or not facing off against Donald Trump, hoping that they could just rig the general election so they'll have another puppet in the White House. It's ridiculous.
Charles, Newsweek is calling this drinking problem rumors. I mean, you see her in public in the middle of the day, seems obviously drunk to me. One quick thing, I don't know if you know this, Robert Kennedy has actually bested Donald Trump in one category. He's being investigated for even more ridiculous crap, collecting whales.
I mean, it's just, what do these people do in Washington, D.C.? I mean, it's to the point now. Washington, D.C. is Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, we need to do what is happening in Indonesia, what happened in Brazil, what happened indeed in the United States of America centuries ago. We need a new capital. It's crystal clear that the population of Washington, D.C. is not representative of the nation at large. It's crystal clear. It's crystal clear that the grift mill is headquartered in Washington, D.C. and its suburbs. And it's crystal clear that we have, people on the right and the left will agree, we have a massive spending problem in our federal and other governments across the country. We have too much debt, and we're either going to go bankrupt, which I hope we don't, or we're going to solve this problem. And one way we could solve the problem is by breaking up the federal government and selecting a new capital, likely in the center of the country, the geographic center, or maybe slightly to the east of the geographic center of the country. That's what we need to do.
That makes sense. Put it in the middle. Wouldn't that make the most sense?
Well, again, the population is something like 80% of the population is east of the Mississippi. So, whether you take the geographic center, which would be somewhere, I think, in Iowa, or whether you scrunch it slightly to the east, I don't know. But you definitely need to get it out of Washington, D.C. I mean, that you cannot, no conservative Republican can get a fair trial in Washington, D.C. We see that in what happened to Peter Navarro and what happened to Steve Bannon, where on the other hand, you've got Eric Holder, who's boldly defying the law, and Hillary Clinton saying, we need to put people in prison who spread misinformation. Hey, Hillary, you hear of the Steele dossier recently? You remember that one? Or are you out there with Kamala on the Chardonnay game? I mean, it's reprehensible what's going on. And we don't have a press. I mean, the mainstream press between New York and Washington, D.C. is something like 97% Democrat. It's not doing its job.
The gaslighting is unbelievable.
She has no shame, this lady. No shame. And the thing, whether she goes to prison before she dies is an open question, but historians eventually will put her in the prison she deserves. This woman is an affront to her gender. She's despicable. I mean, living a lie with her husband after, her husband is a serial philanderer and abuser of vulnerable people. That's her husband. She knows that. She's supposed to be the smartest woman in the world. She must know that. She shares multiple houses with the dude, yet she's still married. A real tough, smart woman would say, I've realized I made a mistake in marrying this philanderer. I'm gone, and I'm going to take all of his shit.
Look at this,
That's not her. So
just 6 hours ago, we have a comment from her. Hillary Clinton celebrates decades of marriage to Bill after being deeply hurt. We just have a good time. 50-year marriage. Wow. She makes rare comments about the marriage to Bill. No one but those two people know what goes on. Actually, that's not true. We got a pretty good idea what's going on. Fareed Zakaria.
It's a marriage of convenience.
It's a marriage of criminals. It's convenient to not have to testify against one another. But
right.
They're saying that the biggest wild card in the presidential election, just days left until a crippling port strike paralyzes the East Coast. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, they'll probably settle that. I mean, these kind of negotiations always go right up to the wire, if not past the wire. But, this is Pete Buttigieg at work. He's out there trying to catalog all the racist roads, leaves this to the last minute. This could have been settled a long time ago. But no, he's got better ideas.
Somebody was saying that Trump has a plan to do away with Bretton Woods. Do you know about that?
Bretton Woods, I don't.
But they did have that whole Fed adjusted the interest rates. And I don't know, have we found out yet what that's going to do, or we have to wait until this week?
Again, most of the analysis, I would argue, is purposefully wrong, right? I mean, to look at the way I look at it is, you can't just be an expert on the Federal Reserve. You have to be looking at the U.S. economy in contrast to other large economies around the world. So Europe is a basket case. The theory was when the European Union came together in 1997, the theory was it will replace or counterbalance the US because it's bigger, right? But there's no unanimity in the EU. Now you see Germany finally smartening up about the climate, the supposed climate crisis and immigration realities. You see them smartening up, and other nations across Europe are smartening up, and it's just not unified. So it's not really, the euro is a very weak currency. The European governance model is structurally grievously flawed. Private sector jobs are fleeing Europe. Investment is trying to get out of Europe. So if you have a weak dollar, the question is, where else do you put your money? You're not going to put it in Europe. You're not going to put it in Japan. You're not going to put it in China. You're not going to put it in India. You're not going to put it in small countries. And you've got wealth. You've got to put it somewhere. So there's some residual demand or bid for the dollar, even in the negative situation we find ourselves. And so the real question, and I think what Trump's going to do, I hope, is he's going to construct real arguments for investing capital inside the United States of America. And he's going to cut government, put government on a Twitter into X diet. I mean, it's remarkable what Musk did with formerly Twitter, now X, cutting 80% of the staff, and it runs better than it used to.
A lot
better. That's
a
very simple message. If you could do that with a private company, you could certainly do that in a government. And that's what needs to be done.
It runs way better, Charles. I've been beefing with Palmer Luckey. We'll talk about that on another show. But the other thing that people were super pissed off about on X is that, well, at least people that I look at, Mike Johnson has caved again. I'm really disappointed. When I met Mike Johnson, he seemed like a very nice and kind of like diligent, responsible guy. But I don't know, maybe you just get in there and they invite you to a Diddy party or something, and then the next thing you know, you just vote for whatever they tell you.
I don't think it's, in his case, I hope it's not that, but I think what it is, when you're Speaker of the House, you're actually very powerful, and enough crooked multinational companies and entities understand that. And so a lot of money can flow your way if you play the game, and a lot of problems can flow your way if you don't. So as a guest, some powerful people got to him and said, listen, we can't have the government, we can't, you're going to have to run the risk. There's going to be cheating in the election. We cannot have the government shut down before the election. And they found a way to both threaten and pat his coffers as a bet. But
we're at a point now where what are these people going to do with this money when the country is just utterly destroyed?
Again, the stakes we're playing for are in the tens, if not hundreds of trillions of dollars. If you're going to pay some guy $50 million to preserve the option to make, say, 10 trillion, you'll do that all day long if you're a crook. And that's what's going on. I mean, around the imbalance here, people talk about inequality. The inequality in power between the very, very rich crooks, the cartels, for example, in South America, the Yakuza in Japan, and other criminal elements around the world are extremely powerful and extremely ruthless. And I'm not saying they got to Mike Johnson, but we're not playing smart in the federal government. We simply aren't. Speaking
of gangs, Charles, there was an article earlier saying that Chicago gangbangers are raging against the newly arrived Venezuelan migrants as Tren de Aragua moves in, and the city is going to go up in flames. It's funny, people were like rooting for the homebrew gangs. You're in a terrible situation when you want Chicago gangs to prevail.
I mean, these people are not, you see these pictures, right? All the outrage over Michael Brown and in other instances of police brutality. If the police are so freaking tough, how come gangbangers in Tren de Aragua and others are running riot across the country? How come in Los Angeles, why do we have that $6.5 million mansion that's still owned by some? Why has that been ransacked? I mean, why isn't there a 500-person police route of that? You know, and you take these fucking homeless people and you figure out who they are. As a bet, many of them are drug addicts. Some could be trust fund maniacs, you know, kids who are just lost for whatever reason. You take them one by one, you interview them. If you find out they're a fugitive from justice, you put them through the system and you put them in jail. If you find out they have mental problems that could be dealt with, get them into a mental institution. But you can't leave this mansion the way it is and think that people around the world aren't going to notice that. Say, well, okay, America has a southern border that's open. I'm living in, you know, elephant shit somewhere in Africa. You know, I'll take the risk that
Let's go
I might
squat
get
in the
caught.
mansion.
Yeah, I can, you know, clean myself up, swim across the Atlantic Ocean, or however I'm going to get back to the United States, crawl across the southern border, and I'll be living large in Beverly Hills. I mean, all it takes is one person to do that out of the billion who live in Africa. And here you have the cackler up there joking about Donald Trump being a threat to democracy. An open border is a manifest threat, not to democracy, but to your way of life.
To living.
You know, how long will it be before some relative of a famous politician is raped or murdered or slashed by one of these illegal immigrants? When that happens, then we'll get serious about the border. Until then, you know, we'll have the cackler until January 20th, 2025.
Now, Charles, let me pause you if I may, because we've reached the end of our portion here on the YouTube and all these other channels. People are going to be able to join us in the First Amendment Forum in less than 5 minutes. Please join us. Sponsors, of course, will be watching on odyssey.com/@crowdsource the truth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, or subscribestar.com, or patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. You know, Charles, people are really noticing that I'm making a difference, I think. This response from Palmer Luckey is really surprising. And I couldn't be doing any of this without the viewer sponsors. You know, if we had some corporate sponsor, imagine if Anduril sponsored Crowdsource the Truth. I wouldn't be able to do any of this reporting. I mean, I'm making a joke out of it, but I'm serious. These newspapers and, you know, broadcast media are sponsored by pharmaceutical companies and maybe even some of these NGOs. We don't know who the sponsors are, but here, the viewers are the sponsors, and so their interest is my interest, and I want to thank all the sponsors who make the show possible. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Stay with us.